Imagine this, you are a shepherd living in the 19th century somewhere in Şamaxı. You have a shepherd dog you love dearly, but during the seasonal migration from winter pasture to summer pasture, it dies. You bury it, and so the grave will not be lost. You plant a fresh willow branch on it. Over time, the branch grows into a large tree, and the grave turns into a site of mass pilgrimage, as people mistake it for a shrine. Some bring offerings, others say prayers, still others bow in reverence. And when you try to explain the truth, you are killed for blasphemy. Salam alaikum, this is Fin. Today's topic is very specific because the object it explores is itself a very specific kind of place. Today we're talking about pirs, or local shrines, their history and present-day reality, their supporters and opponents, and the place pirs occupy in the lives of Azerbaijanis. At the end, the traditional question, Getti. Pirs are places mythologically associated with miraculous healings, supernatural powers, or dwellings of medieval and modern holy fools, missionaries, or descendants of saints. Usually these are rocks, trees, stones, or mountains resembling human forms. The word pir itself comes from Persian and means venerable elder. Pirs have long been and still are very popular among both villagers and city dwellers. Their visitors are not always deeply religious believers. As a child, we often went, for example, to the shrine of Mir Mevsum Ağa in the suburb of Baku. Once my mother took my uncle there, a PhD in economics, who after a short nap on the shrine's grounds said he felt relief. According to folk beliefs, pirs heal. These places combine Islamic tradition with popular veneration of the righteous and their graves. There are around 1,000 pirs across the country. They involve entire rituals and sense of mysticism. For example, at the 8 Gates pier near Baku, one must pass through all 8 arches in a strict sequence for a wish to come true. Enter from the right, exit from the left. Leaving the last one, people strike a metal plate like the final gong in boxing match. If you ask the caretakers of these places, they will always tell you a legend about the pir's origin. For example, in one suburb of Baku, there is a shrine called the Footprint of Ali, supposedly because of the imprint of the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. Another pir is Pir Saad Baba. It's linked to the legend of a Şamaxı resident who foresaw a devastating earthquake in a prophetic dream. Considered insane, he left his village and settled there. After the catastrophe, his dwelling became a shrine. People who sense or know about the impending death, their own or others, have always drawn attention. There are several theories about how pirs emerged. One is political. Their active formation dates back to the 14th, 15th centuries and is linked to the rise of Sufi orders. It's no coincidence that pirs are widespread in Azerbaijan, neighboring Iran and adjacent regions of the Middle East, Turkestan and Afghanistan. These lands were once part of the powerful Safavid state, a Shiite empire whose ruling elite originated from a Sufi order of the same name. Critics argue that shrines and even fictitious graves of Sayyids, direct descendants of the Prophet Muhammad, were deliberately created. The Quran was used as an ideological tool to legitimize a new religious political reality, and stones, rocks and other natural objects were sacralized as holy sites. For example, in Western Azerbaijan, there is a shrine called Khachakaya, split rock. According to legend, a son-in-law of the Prophet Ali split it with his sword while fighting a dragon. Ali's name is often used in the titles. This is likely for a PR campaign by the Prophet himself, but rather as a way of granting shrines authority through the name of one of Islam's most revered figures. Otherwise, every patch of land on the Arabian Peninsula where he lived would have become sacred. Historians doubt that Ali ever visited the territory of modern Azerbaijan. Beyond spiritual motives, there were practical ones, attracting donations. Pilgrims' contributions funded Sufi orders, ideological activity, spiritual centers, and clergy salaries. Behind the mystical facade lay a pragmatic calculation. Over time, enterprising individuals began exploiting the piety of an illiterate population for personal gains. Pirs gradually transformed from instruments of religious fundraising into questionable business schemes. In the 19th century, in Şamaxı, lived a man named Gulu, who sold oil in clay jugs. One day, a jug filled to the brim began to foam, hiss and overflow. Passerby saw this as a miracle and declared the place a new pir. Gulu said nothing. Soon he became the caretaker, and where there is a caretaker, there are donations. A hut was built over the jug and people from across the Baku province flocked there. While authorities tried to ban worship, the effect was the opposite. Even after learning the jug had been manually refilled by Gulu, people decided the pir was angered by government interference. Why do people believe? Even if stories about the shepherd's dog or the oil jug are exaggerated, the number of pir followers tends to grow over time. With age, people often become more trusting. If something seems incomprehensible, it's easier to believe in it. When given a rational explanation, an inner voice says, "I couldn't have been wrong." But above all, Pilgrims are driven by hope. Some want to be healed from illness, others to improve their fortunes, others to change their fate. When loved ones are involved, people often especially susceptible to beliefs, anything to ease their sufferings. And real cases of recovery, even if coincidental, and the desire to see a miracle overweights rational thinking. If the longing for miracles is universal, why are not pirs everywhere? Here local social specificity plays a role. Unquestionable respect for elders and the habit of trusting their words unconditionally are key factors. Since their faiths have been passed down for centuries, many consider it legitimate. Attempts at enlightenment or coercion often backfire, strengthening belief instead. Orthodox Islamic theology criticizes the veneration of pirs. Seeking help, praying, making donations, or offering sacrifices to anyone but Allah is seen as equating creation with the Creator, a grave sin. Yet almost every pir in Azerbaijan contains a Quran, Islamic symbols, and a caretaker who presents its story as compatible with Islam. Here lies the paradox. Orthodox Islam, which suffered most under Soviet atheism, partially preserved itself thanks to pirs. During Khrushchev's anti-religious campaigns, clergy were forced underground, as between the world wars. Mosques were closed, open rituals were allowed only at funerals. Religious life moved into private spaces. Thus emerged the concepts of parallel Islam and non-mosque activities. A compromise formed. You couldn't go to the mosques, but you could gather quietly at home. Inspections in 1958 aimed to demonstrate calm on the religious front. Reports claimed pirs were destroyed and visits were random acts by elderly people. In reality, in the absence of mosques, pirs became a way to preserve religious identity. People gathered in the homes of descendants of saints, holy fools, or healers. Stories of miracles spread, such as Mir Mevsum Agha allegedly being arrested and placed in a Black Maria and NKVD vehicle, which then wouldn't start, forcing authorities to return him. In the 1970s, 80s in Sheki, a party secretary tried to suppress pir visits, confiscating pilgrims' belongings. A month later, a heavy rainstorm in Baku swept away the vehicle carrying the goods. People interpreted this as divine punishment. When Perestroika reopened mosques, pirs didn't lose their relevance. In the 21st century, pirs appear in a new light. They attract both domestic and international tourists. Unlike many countries where temples are empty or turned into museums, Azerbaijan's religious sites remain alive. They combine mysticism, sincerity, and charity. For example, the Shirvanshah's Palace complex in Baku's Old City includes the shrine of Seyyid Yahya Bakuvi, or the Bibi-Heybat shrine, located between sea and mountains. Spirituality, history, and emotional intensity intervene there. Such pilgrimages easily integrate with other forms of tourism. Pirs are not just shrines of stone and wood. They are the result of centuries of intervening Sufism, folk beliefs, Shiite and Sunni traditions, historical upheavals, and above all, the human need for hope. They have survived empires and ideologies, becoming deeply embedded in Azerbaijan's cultural and religious landscape. A kind of cultural code reflecting how society seeks protection, meaning, and miracles where rationality doesn't always provide comfort. And however one views them as sacred heritage, social phenomenon, or illusion, one thing remains constant. In difficult times, people are especially drawn to miracles. So here is the question: are pirs faith and sanctity, or a form of delusion and illusion? And most importantly, why? Write your answers under the pinned comment. Subscribe, like, hit the bell, leave comments, and share this video with friends. By the way, this video is also available in Russian, and remember, there is no good or bad culture. There is simply a different culture. Salamat kal.